I'm sure most of you guys know that Elon and Grimes Grimes had a baby, and its name is
The baby's name is something like
Ash Wednesday times 12.
I got to show you guys my favorite. I'm sure everyone already knows that the baby's name is something hard to understand for humans. This is my favorite one that I've seen so far on Twitter was the baby's name X Ash A12 or whatever. First day at preschool.
So there's like a robot that is now dancing that just scared a bunch of
It's like an
preschoolers.
alien robot. It's both an alien and a robot.
And then I don't know if
kinda
you've seen that
fitting.
meme where it's just preschoolers freaking out. Like,
What are they actually reacting to in that? Is it a clown or something? I've seen that video before, but I forgot.
yeah, I don't remember either. I don't remember now what the original thing is.
It must have been really scary because that kid's flipping out.
Here, I'll put it in Discord so people can see what we're talking. It's so good. It's so good.
So Elon Musk and G Rhymes had a kid, right? We don't know the name, but
Well, did you hear Joe Rogan? We delayed the podcast a little bit so we could listen to the 2-hour-long Joe Rogan interview in case there's something crazy that had to do with it. They mostly talked about Neuralink, but they were talking about the first thing that they talked about was the baby's name. And, Elon's saying, X and then Ash, I guess, I think is the AE part in this Elvish language that I guess Grimes speaks. Then he goes, an A12, the predecessor to the SR-71. That was my contribution because that jet's awesome.
do you know anything about that?
When it first came up, he did kind of go like, yeah.
Yeah.
Like he was like, yeah, I know. It was kind of whatever. Like he knows. I know.
I wonder the people at the hospital or wherever they gave birth are trying to, because once you have a baby, immediately they fill out the birth certificate, right? Or, very shortly thereafter. And so I wonder if the person's, because the Elvish thing is not like letters that you can type, right? So you're like, what the hell?
Right.
Like, how do I like Google this symbol? Like, hey, can you just text me that? Like, character you just typed? What's the Unicode for that? Like, how do you even?
Yeah, there might be some code for it.
It's not
break
something
the
you can
system.
write on paper. It requires a circle of friends, a fire, and 12 elvish knights or something like before you can pronounce and spell this, or whatever.
Well, it is almost. It's kind of a dick move to name a kid. Not toward the kid necessarily, but I'm thinking about like the teacher someday. Every time they enter his name into the computer, they get like, okay, how do I do that stupid symbol again? They have to like look up they have to Google how to like put his name in the computer.
I'm sure they'll just be called Ash, I'm guessing, or something like that,
Now, I did see somewhere that well, okay, so he had said on the program on the Joe Rogan thing that he did say the name Ash somewhere in there, so I'm sure that's what it's going to wind up coming to. I heard though that you could break it down to Kyle somehow, that like 12 is the 12th letter, and that's an L, and the AE thing is like an all sound, and anyway, somebody was trying to ration that it was Kyle.
Huh. Yep.
So lots of Monster energy drinks and punching drywall for Elon's kid.
And just to think, if that kid was born just like 2 days earlier, Tesla would be $15 billion richer. So that's just something to consider as well.
Wait, why did you say that?
I don't get that. You said that in text, and I didn't understand what you meant by that.
Well, because Elon wouldn't, he would have been busy with a kid and kind of in this like la la land, not, tearing down his companies on Twitter like he likes to do.
Well, the stock pretty much bounced back entirely, didn't it? I mean,
I don't know.
It recovered.
I completely don't pay attention to the stock market.
Yeah. We know, Ben.
Yeah, I'm short the whole thing. He did really get into the Neuralink stuff, which we've not really talked about much in a long time, but I think that was actually in the show description originally, because maybe we thought it was going to be a more popular topic, or not popular, but just like there would be more to talk about. Joe, I think you've done a video on Neuralink, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've done a couple, I think.
And did you listen to the podcast, and like, what do you think? Like any insights there, anything new?
Nothing new really that I saw. It didn't surprise me that Joe Rogan leaned on that. That's totally his thing. He's into that kind of stuff. But what surprised me, I know that Elon had said before that he wants Neuralink to get to where it's basically like getting LASIK, and which is kind of hard to imagine if you're literally drilling a hole in somebody's head. But like at one point, it was supposed to be like the size of your pinky, like a little, like what, 1 centimeter. And in this one, he was saying it might be an inch right now.
Right.
Early stages, obviously. But it was always the case that early on it was going to be treating muscle conditions and, disabilities and stuff like that, giving people the ability to interact in a way that they couldn't because of physical issues. But so in the beginning, I mean, like right now they have those things that literally like attach a cord to your head.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But they're doing some pretty amazing stuff with that. There's actually been some news on that front with people being able to like work prosthetic arms with just their mind on one of these brain implants. But it's like an old Nokia cell phone sticking out of the top of their head. Mm-hmm. Like for real, this isn't something people are going to walk around with. It's a lab thing. Exactly.
Depends on you have an old Qualcomm.
Yeah, just take that antenna and stick it.
For people that are just listening, I've got an original Qualcomm cell phone, actually not even opened. It's completely still in the box that I just happen to have sitting here. You'll have to guess why. I don't know.
Now, I did think he was being aggressive with his Elon time when it came to I think Joe asked how long would it be before people would be able to communicate without speaking through something like Neuralink, and he said like 5 years.
Yeah.
I'm going, they're still going to be just using it for people with disabilities in 5 years. I mean, it's
100% agree. Yeah. And I think he said 5 years is best case. 10 years is more realistic.
He said like best case would be like 5 to 10.
Yeah.
So I think he's being very absolute optimistic.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I still think that's aggressive Elon time though. Like even when you look at self-driving cars and you hear Elon be like, 6 months, we'll be good. And then literally every other expert in the field is like, maybe 15 years. So it's like so disconnected, but that's what he does. Elon does what Elon does.
The one thing that I think there's a little bit of loss in translation that I don't think Joe and Elon were connecting on was when Elon was talking about how it has the potential to potentially like repair, in a sense, problems with the mind, of course, like Alzheimer's and certain things where he said the circuit's kind of broken. And Joe's like, what? And you just stimulate it, There are, of course, some things like seizures and stuff where you can stimulate certain regions of the brain because they're having some kind of short circuit or whatever and override that in certain ways. But I think Elon was more referring to the fact that you could bridge broken neuron gaps through Neuralink. So if the brain if Neuralink is inside your head and you have the ability to re-bridge broken, signals in the brain, which could cause, physical problems or whatever, mental issues, eventually, like if we get smart enough, we could realize, this person has this condition, the cortex isn't meeting up to blah, blah, blah. And maybe they could start routing signals through physical wires, that used to exist, but now you're doing it through Neuralink. And I don't think it's you can't remember something here, let's zap it a little bit there, and now you're going to remember. I don't think that's what they're intending. I think it's like literally a physical bridge of information that can occur once you map out the brain and have a healthy enough understanding of how it works and where and why and when.
That to me has always been the biggest question I have about Neuralink. There's a really good book called Brain Rules. I don't know if you guys have read it, but the guy's job, I forget what the official title is, but he basically, studies the brain to try to understand how it works. And he wrote another one too, Brain Rules for Baby, which is equally as good. But throughout the whole thing, he's basically like, we really don't know much about how or why things are. Like, where do thoughts actually come from? Is there a certain part of the brain? How do those things like? So he was very much like, we don't know so much. So I think that's where I see a big gap in like what Elon is kind of saying and maybe what reality is. I don't know. Maybe he has access to some other scientists that are smarter than the guy that wrote that book. But my impression after reading that was like, like doing anything kind of like the more advanced things, like not having to speak, it seems a bit far-fetched based on our basically like almost complete lack of knowledge of how those bits work. Like we can say, oh, this little thing moves your arm, right? But there's so much more that we don't even comprehend. So I don't know.
But
like I'm
think,
excited that I can help
honestly,
people, but I really call into doubt the whole like, not speaking, ever.
I think that's actually one of the easier ones. I think
really?
Speech, absolutely, because
thought though, you're talking about reading thoughts.
Absolutely. We can do that very well already with MRIs and things where you basically train someone, okay, think about cat, and think about dog and think about this, and they just literally
that spits out an image.
And then, you just see which parts of the brain are firing, literally, and you can you can correlate then what the brain is doing when it's thinking about those words. And then there's a way that theoretically, actually, in Neuralink, if you have 10,000 tiny little sensors, that's a high fidelity picture of the brain. You could easily map which sections are lighting up during certain words. And so there'll be a direct correlation between I'm thinking about grocery store and here's what the map of the grocery store looks like in your brain. And the computer has to learn through machine learning. You flag it a couple times. You think grocery store 10 times and say yes. And then all of a sudden, boom, it knows how you're thinking of grocery store.
I imagine you use the word map a few times there. I think that's the right word to use because everybody's brain is wired just a bit differently. I mean, we have certain cortexes that handle things and that's pretty standard, but I am very curious, like what the configuration process is going to be once you get a Neuralink installed in your head, like kind of what you were just saying, like think about this, or I imagine the first non-physical disability uses for it would be literally an interface between us and a computer that doesn't require us typing, where you can just literally move the mouse around with your mind and just, think, I want to Google this, and it just Googles it kind of thing. But, or basically just like using your brain as an interface instead of the keyboard and the mouse. But, I imagine there's going to be this whole thing where you're like having to follow a dot around on the screen or learn how to move it, and it's mapping you and you're figuring it out at the same time. It's like a symbiotic kind of thing. It's interesting tech. I'm really curious to see how it goes.
Well, it'd be a really easy way to map your brain and direct correlations between what you're thinking about and what you're trying to do, especially like on a phone or a computer, would be literally reading while you're typing, like mapping your brain while you're typing words. So that literally AI knows what you're thinking about, has the input, and eventually you can remove your analog input and just think about it. And it, as long as it's learned enough of like what you're thinking about while you're typing, you might just have to sit there. I mean, for a year, using your phone for a year, it might know how you use your phone through what you're thinking about. And then next thing you know, eventually you just you look at your phone and you even just think like unlock it. Well, that's another problem, is bringing those inputs back in, I think is going to be a lot harder than reading the output,
Yeah, I see what you're saying there. Because, like, I guess when I heard we won't have to speak, to me, I'm the way I'm hearing that from him is like these things can communicate with each other in a very high fidelity way. They don't have issues of needing to be charged, really, or maybe the battery, like, they're sufficient enough to where, like, I won't ever have to speak. And then it can do, input and output. Yeah, because I think it's one thing to map certain bits and be like, oh, that's what you're thinking about when you think of grocery store. But then to convey that message to me with a good amount of detail to where I know exactly what you're saying. I don't know. It seems like a giant step forward.
I mean, but that exists already. Cochlear implants are exactly that. They take an analog signal. That's exactly what it is. It's very, very low resolution. Like, horrendously low resolution, worse than the worst phone call you'll ever have been on in your life. But they can, interpret audio signals and then literally just stimulate portions of your brain that would normally be stimulated by your ear canal, by your ears, and then your brain learns to interpret those signals as audio. So you can still do that, and we could eventually get a lot better. And we even do that with eyes. Have you seen where they'll take like 64 dots or something like that? It's the lowest resolution camera you'd ever have for eyes, but it can give blind people the ability to at least like see shapes and get a sense of like, I might run into a pole.
And,
Yeah. So, I mean, we have the rudimentary things. Now, if we go from 64 inputs to thousands, why can't we do that on a lot higher fidelity?
Yeah.
So like if you're talking about speaking without speaking, like reading people's minds and communicating that way, I imagine you would need one array in your language center and one array in your auditory cortex. And those would have to be connected so that, like, as you're thinking something, it would go into that auditory cortex and then send it out a signal from there that then would go into somebody else's auditory cortex, and then they would just process it.
Would they hear it?
I think it would kind of be like just hearing a voice in your head.
Like, would it be like, oh, like you didn't actually say anything, but I heard it, like you did.
Yeah.
Well, that's what eventually I think your brain would learn. Would learn to experience it. It would just reinterpret it basically, as audio, I would assume, or I don't know. I don't know what that's like.
Now here's where, okay, so the speaking to people, maybe even seeing things that are in a visual cortex from your mind through a computer or something like that. What if you could feel somebody else's emotions?
Right.
What if you could actually tap into somebody else's emotions and feel what they're feeling?
Oof.
Well, that's I think where he was going a lot with it, right? I think he was getting into that was like you would be connected at a deeper level that wasn't just
right
the current forms that we've evolved to body language and all the other forms.
Yeah. But think about all the BS that would cut through in arguments with your spouse or whatever. And you say a thing and it hurts them and you didn't know that it hurt them. But if you could actually feel what they're feeling, it's like, oh crap, I did that.
Yeah.
I didn't mean that, and then you could, and then they could feel your regret for what you said and guilt that you're feeling from it, That sounds like a nightmare, actually. Maybe we should do that.
I
have enough emotions that I have to feel. I need to feel somebody else's.
I feel like there's been a few movies like this.
Well, I feel like one of the things that was unusual is Joe seemed to get hung up on, what do you mean there won't be any spoken word? What about like when someone just like is a wordsmith and puts together this beautiful, it's like that will still happen. And he was quoting like words in a book. I'm like, that wasn't spoken word. That was written word. You're reading it. It doesn't lose its potency of how like beautiful and well written and elegant it was, in the same way that when thought words will be the exact same thing. Like there'll still be artistry in forming words. It's not going to be gone just because it's not spoken out your mouth.
It's like just because we can fly in an airplane doesn't mean that we don't walk anymore.
Yeah, exactly. That too.
Walking.
Walking in LA.
Well,
what else did you guys get from it? Because I think it was kind of like a lot of nothing. And then at the end, at the last 5 minutes, I was like, oh, now we got some details.
Well, that's when they got into the Tesla stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
There's no SpaceX.
And specifically, I'm super sad.
Yeah, well, let's round up the rest of that talk because there's no there's no SpaceX talk. There was a lot of COVID talk, which I was gritting my teeth the whole time. How's this going to go? And I will say that
he was more reserved. He was a bit more reserved.
And I see where he's coming from. You got a better sense of like why he said the things he said, but it just came out in such a burst that was unfortunate last week, I think. But
yeah, I mean, and I agree with him to a large part about, I mean, and we're doing it, right? Like in California, we're now officially, so tomorrow, Friday, we'll officially be in what they call phase 2 of the reopening. So yeah, we're doing it. I think it's just a matter of like how to do it in a responsible way. Mm-hmm. So, but I'm all for getting things back now that we have more data and that tests are more available. Like I know in LA County now, no matter who you are or anything, you can just like drive up to one of these several sites and just get a free test. And it's not like some, something a doctor, my friend came up with. It's like a legit, like from them test. So yeah, mm-hmm. I felt the same way, Tim. It's like they were different people. It's like that there was the like rational human talking about it that maybe has opinions that are different than some other people's. And then there's like whatever the hell that was on Twitter. It's like a Jekyll and Hyde. It's like totally different people.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think that's probably all of us to a certain degree too. But it was just it was, I think, good for this, again, like shareholders and stuff to not have it be a total You know, there is nothing that was just horrendous, you know. Yeah. I don't know.
I do kind of feel like there was somebody that was like, "You're going on Joe Rogan. We got some cleaning up to do."
Or you are not
maybe,
going on
maybe
Joe
that's
Rogan.
a dumb thing for me to say because it didn't work out so well last time.
Exactly. Yeah, someone on the teams of the comms were just like, "You are not going on Joe. Right now you're going on Joe Rogan? Remember what happened last time? Look at what you just did last." No. And he's like, "I'm going on Joe Rogan."
Do you ever feel like, I mean, what the content of the things he's been saying aside, it feels like everything was going so well, COVID aside and pandemic aside, everything was going so well for all of his companies and everything. And sometimes I feel like things are going really well and he has to be like, you know, and just like throw a live grenade into it. And then suddenly it's just like Elon everywhere. Elon. He did this crazy thing. He did that crazy thing. And then he kind of goes away again. And I kind of feel like he just has to pop up every once in a while and just kind of be.
I think he kind of loves that. I think he likes to troll the media. I think, frankly, that's a lot of it. Is he knows that in the long run, kind of Donald Trump syndrome too, like that being in the news. No such thing as
bad publicity.
Yeah, like being in the news is being in the news.
Well, so have you guys read his biography, the Ashley Vance one?
Yeah.
He talked about it in there, or he was quoted in there about it, saying that he wanted, with Tesla anyways at the time, a major news story every single week. So he wanted like something, and then fast forward with Twitter and 30 plus million followers later, he can be that news story with, you know, in 5 seconds if he wants to be.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, he has a lot more influence than a lot of the media, which is just crazy.
Well, and that's why, like, the tone that he took on Joe Rogan, I don't agree with everything he said, and I think there's some stuff that he said that I've seen counter evidence to, but the tone was better. I'm cool with that. It was just the rhetoric he was using online at a time when we have people literally storming state houses with military weaponry demanding that they get their way. It's like, this is not the time to do crazy stuff and take on that kind of rhetoric. It seemed dangerous to me.
Yeah, definitely.
You know,
definitely
with that following and that responsibility that he has.
It's I was gonna say it's almost like he doesn't like. I mean, all of us combined have like a fractional amount of influence on the world that he does, but. I don't know if you guys have felt it ever, but like I've done stuff where like later I learned like, oh man, that actually. Like people cared what I thought, you know, where like weird. You live your whole life and like nobody gives a shit. But now it's like all of a sudden, and again, not to say that we have some major anything but you know, we have some voice online that people listen to. Him, that's where I think I took kind of offense to the whole thing. I'm like, dude, you're not a normal person. Like you're like you saying anything, you could like inspire everybody, or you could bring out the pitchforks.
Yeah.
Let's inspire people. Let's focus on the good stuff. Even if it means you don't get to share, like just tweet or text your friends. You know what I mean? Right. Just like
vent there.
Yeah. Like, do that, you know, have it be a leaked thing, not be like you just freaking blasting it out there. Like, to me, that's where I'm like, like he doesn't know that he has any influence in the world.
Hey, thanks for checking us out, guys. I hope you enjoyed this clip from our podcast.
We do a weekly show here on YouTube, so make sure to subscribe to Our Ludicrous Future, where we discuss all the things that are going to make our future totally ludicrous.
You can join us here on YouTube or at any of your favorite podcast places. Plus, if you want to get some behind-the-scenes stuff and join a cool community, you can help support the channel at patreon.com. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.